Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Furlong, and today we're talking about matter. Matter is all around us. Everything that we can touch, everything that we feel, everything that we see is made up of matter. And it's found in one of four different states: solids, liquids, gases, or plasma. Sometimes the matter's around us and we can't even see it, like for instance in air. Today though, we're going to take a look at different combinations of matter. And so let's first get a definition. Matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. The basic unit of matter is an atom. So all matter is made up of atoms. What we're going to be focusing on though is the composition of matter. I want to start with pure substances. Now a pure substance by definition is simply any substance that has a fixed composition. So an example of this would be elements. All atoms in an object are the same in an element. So for instance, if we had pure carbon or aluminum or copper, every atom in that substance would be the same. And that's what makes it an element. It's the purest form of matter. But we don't usually find elements all by themselves like that. They're usually combining with other elements. And if they are combined with another element, they are called a compound. So a compound are two or more different elements combined together. So for instance, we have salt. And you can see that picture on your screen. This is one way in which we get salt. They flood a large area, they let the water evaporate, and they can get the salt then. Water is another type of element made up of two atoms of hydrogen, one atom of oxygen. The smallest part of any matter that's not just an element is called a molecule. So for instance, water, H2O, is the smallest part of water. If we were to separate H2O into hydrogen and oxygen, we would no longer have water anymore. But we could also have, say, O2. These are two oxygen atoms combined together. This is the type of oxygen that's in the air. Or hydrogen, H2, is two hydrogen atoms combined together. One thing to take note of is that H2O is an example of a compound, but oxygen and hydrogen are not, because you have to have two different elements to make up a compound. But whether it's a compound or not, the smallest unit of any non-element is going to be a molecule. Now we can also find matter in the form of a mixture. This is where you take two or more substances and you mix them together. The thing is, in a mixture, the different substances are easily separated from one another. Now there's different kinds of mixtures. There are heterogeneous mixtures. And in this case, in a heterogeneous mixture, the mixture does not have to have the same proportions. So for instance, a few examples of a heterogeneous mixture would be like pizza. It's got the dough and it's got the tomato sauce and the cheese and the pepperonis and the mushrooms and olives, and that's getting me hungry already just thinking about that. Or say like the cheese in the bottom picture is made up of many different things that are combined together. Or the granite rock that we see. There's different minerals that's making up that rock. If we were to take any two slices of pizza, you're going to have different amounts of pepperoni on it or cheese on it, for instance. If we take a different piece of granite rock, you're going to have different amounts of minerals that are present in that rock. So they're not the same throughout. They're heterogeneous. A homogeneous mixture, on the other hand, is when we have two or more different substances, but they're blended together evenly. So for example, soft drinks, soda. It has water, it has carbon dioxide, it has sugar, it has flavoring in there. All of it's mixed together. Whether I take, from the first sip of the can to the last sip, it's going to be the same mixture. Vinegar is another example. It's a type of acetic acid mixed in with water. These can also be called solutions when they're evenly mixed together. So oftentimes when you're looking at a homogeneous mixture, one of the components is going to be water. Another example of a solution is called a colloid. This is a mixture where the particles never settle out. So for instance, milk is a colloid suspension. There's fat and there's protein in that milk, and it's the same throughout. Paint can be the same way. Air is a colloid mixture. We have the same amounts of oxygen and nitrogen and carbon dioxide found anywhere within the atmosphere. And the last type are suspensions. Now this is a mixture in which the particles can settle out. A good example of this is river water. We've all seen this. We take a look at the Maumee River and it's oftentimes brown, and that's because of the sediment, the dirt particles that are just simply floating in the water. But if you were to get a glass of river water and just let it set out, those particles will settle to the bottom and you see that the water is actually pretty clear. Here we see a satellite view of the Maumee River as it enters into Lake Erie, and you can see all those sediments that are coming into the lake that eventually will start to settle out. Well, let's take a look at this concept map. It looks pretty complicated, but let's break this down. Matter can be divided up into two parts. One type is called a pure substance, and the other type is called a mixture. So let's focus on the pure substances. There's three different types of pure substances. One of them is an element. A couple examples of elements are aluminum and carbon. In fact, any of the elements found on the periodic table would be considered a type of pure substance, a type of element. Another kind of pure substance are the compounds. So an example is sodium chloride, made up of two different elements, sodium and chlorine. Another example is sugar, made up of three elements. It's made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Another type of pure substance are the molecules. A couple examples are water, H2O, which is a compound. Another example is O2, oxygen, which is not a compound, but it is a molecule. So let's go over to the mixture side. There's four different examples of mixtures. One type is the homogeneous mixture. Remember, this is where the substances throughout that mixture are the same. That's why it's also called a solution. One example is something like Coca-Cola or vinegar. Another type of mixture is a heterogeneous mixture. A couple examples we gave on this was a pizza or something like granite. Another type of mixture is a colloid or a colloid suspension. An example of this is milk. It's the same throughout. Another example is a suspension. I gave that example of river water. So we can break down matter in many different ways. We'll be taking a look at some of these in a lab, and I'll see you in class.